Hello guys, this is Hannah from Revision Dojo, and today we're going to be looking at A1.1.5, Solvent Properties of Water linked to its roles as a medium for metabolism and for transport in plants and animals. Okay, so let's look at what a solvent is. Now, a solvent is essentially a liquid that some form of substance can dissolve in. There are many different types of solvent, but there is no one universal solvent. Now today we're going to be looking at water as a solvent. So water is great for hydrophilic polar substances. So as we looked in previous syllabus points, water is a polar substance, which means that there is an unequal sharing of electrons between a water molecule. So water is also hydrophilic, which means that it loves water. Hydro means water and philic means loving. So think about that as loving water. Now, as a polar molecule, water, it means that it has a partial positive charge on one end and a partial negative charge on the other end. Now let me draw you guys a water molecule. So imagine that this is our hydrogen and this is our oxygen. So we're going to have a partial positive charge on the hydrogen atom and a partial negative charge on the oxygen atom. So that means that there is an unfair sharing of electrons between these atoms. Now, also because of the polarity, water forms hydrogen bonds with other water molecules, and not only other water molecules, but other polar molecules. And so, when water encounters a substance, the positive side of water molecules is attracted to the negative charges, and vice versa, the negative charges are attracted to the positive charges of another molecule. Now, let's also look at nonpolar molecules. So, water, it will not dissolve in nonpolar substances well, as nonpolar molecules, they don't have the charged regions that cannot form hydrogen bonds with water. Instead, what happens is they tend to group together, minimizing their contact with water and energy expenditure. So water, it can dissolve in nonpolar substances, but it does not do this well, and it definitely does not do this with the aid of hydrogen bonds, which we do see with polar molecules. Okay. So hydrophobic molecules, they need to be transported in the water environment in something known as micelles. Now micelles are these small little vesicles that can aid the transportation of hydrophobic molecules in water. Now it could either be micelles or with some associated protein, such as oxygen being transported with hemoglobin. So hydrophobic substances requires some form of medium in order to be able to be transported in water environments. And we have said that this could be in the form of micelles, or it could be in the form of an associated protein, which will help aid the transportation process. And an example that we've looked at is oxygen with hemoglobin. Okay. Now, as a side note for you guys, it is nice to remember that the solubility of oxygen is greater at higher temperatures. Keep this in mind for a few syllabus points ahead. Now, let's look at the dissolution process. So, this dissolution process is essentially when an ionic or polar compound is placed in water, and the water molecules surround the ion over these polar molecules. The positive end of water molecules surround negatively charged ions or regions, while the negatively charged ends, they surround the positively charged ions or regions, pulling apart the substance and dissolving it. So when an ionic compound, let's take for example table salts, which is sodium chloride, Now, imagine that you guys are pouring this table salt into a cup of water. Now, what happens on a molecular level is that the water molecules surround the individual ions. So I'm going to separate this into a positive sodium ion and a negative chloride ion. So what happens is these molecules separate from each other when it's dissolved in water. The negatively charged oxygen end of the water molecules surround cations. Now the cation here, as we mentioned before, is the sodium, and the anion is going to be the chloride. So the oxygen, the negatively charged end, which is the oxygen end, is going to surround the cations, like the sodium, and the positively charged end, the hydrogen ends, are going to surround the anions, like chloride. This process is called solvation. And the cluster of water molecules around an ion is known as a hydration shell. Okay. Now, this interaction, it stabilizes the ions in solution, and it prevents them from reassociating and keeping them dissolved. So, let's take our table salt example again. So once you guys put this table salt in a cup of water, you notice that it stays dissolved. The table salt, it does not separate back into the spoon of table salt that you once had. So the interaction that we talked about of the charges surrounding the opposite charge, this is what stabilizes the ions in solution, prevents them from reassociating, and keeps them dissolved. Okay, so let's look at the biological importance of solubility. So we've looked at a couple of examples before, but let me write them down here. So one, for the transport of substances. Now, water's ability to dissolve a wide range of substances is what makes it so essential for the transport of nutrients, gases, waste products, and biological organisms. For example, blood plasma is primarily water and can carry dissolved glucose, electrolytes, and oxygen throughout the body. The next biological importance of solubility includes in chemical reactions. So most biochemical reactions, including those that occur in our cells, take place in aqueous solutions. Enzymes and substrates dissolve in water, allowing chemical reactions to occur efficiently. So that's why it's so important for chemical reactions to require water as a solvent. And the final point we're going to look at is a process known as homeostasis. So, water's solvent properties help maintain homeostasis by allowing the body to regulate the concentration of various solutes, ensuring that cells and tissues function properly.